Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cubicle the CEO. Today, I'm joined by an OG guest of ours. Actually, if you go way, way back in the archives, which you probably don't want to because the early episodes, oh my gosh, looking back or listening back, I should say, my voice, I sound so just wimpy and not at all what we've evolved into. But anyways, for those of you who have been here since the beginning, you probably remember Adrienne Dorison from, I believe it was episode 2. And Adrienne has been such an incredible part of my business journey since 2019 when we first met in Greece, of all places, through our mutual friend, Rachel Peterson. And it has been so much fun just to stay in each other's world over the years. We've both hired each other for different things. We've collaborated. It's just such a joy to have you back, Adrienne. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I always love going down memory lane of Greece and Rachel and the connections. And I just recently had Rachel on my podcast because she was one of my OG, online friends. And so I love that the OGs are still around and kicking in this era. It's rough out there sometimes.
It is. It is. When women dress as grannies for bachelorette parties and stuff, I kind of feel like there needs to be some sort of reunion or party for people who have outlasted all the things that have happened over the last.
If you've been here for 10 plus years on the internet, we're having a granny party.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I am so excited to talk to you today about this side of licensing that we've never really explored before, both licensing and how people are using their IP, their intellectual property. And just to give our listeners a little background. So Adrienne previously had a business with her ex-business partner, Mike Michalowicz, and they built a really successful company run like clockwork. And there was also a best-selling book called Clockwork that really used a lot of Adrienne's IP around operations, teams, systems. Adrienne, I'm sure you can explain it better than I can. But what we're really looking at today in this case study is, A, what does it look like to give your IP to someone else and kind of build a brand that it's part of you, but it also kind of exists outside of you? And then if you ever decide to untangle said partnership, what does that look like to take your IP back? So again, very, very juicy story here. But Adrienne, what other context do you feel like our listeners need to know before we dig into the details of that?
I think that's good context. My background was from the corporate world when I started my business. I had a business prior to meeting Mike, right? I actually had a fairly successful 7-figure consulting business doing this similar work of helping small business owners be more efficient. And when I was building that, Mike was in the process of writing his book, which was Clockwork, now known as Clockwork. It had a different name, it had a different premise, all the things. So he was very early stages. And someone that I knew was a mutual contact of ours had said that Mike was looking for someone who had Lean Six Sigma experience and certifications, but was applying it to the small business world. And that was exactly what I was doing at the time in my private practice. And so that's how we got connected. So it wasn't like my first business was with him. It was actually we were very thoughtfully and curated, it was a curation to connect us because I already had a lot of IP in place. And then he started interviewing me for the book, which was meant to just be one interview. And then it turned into more and more questions, more and more framework development, which then turned into that intellectual property that the book was, which then I made a conscious choice once he asked me if I wanted to partner to really close down the other business that I was running because it would just be the same work with a different name. So I was like, okay, do you want to join forces here or do you want to keep doing this on your own? But now all of your intellectual property is already in this book. Either way, it's already in this book.
Right, right.
So
and I definitely want to better understand how that works when you partner with someone on a book or give them kind of like your signature framework, your IP in a book format. So we'll get there in just a second. But just for my own personal understanding, what year was this when you were first introduced to Mike and he was in the process of writing the book?
Introduced in 2016. So 2016, 2017 were like the book writing manuscript years of working, early days.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, then Adrienne, the book came first. And then after the book was already published, is that when you guys decided to join forces on the company side? Or was it kind of a simultaneous process?
It was simultaneous. Like we already were in basically the interview phases of the book writing project. And he had thought that he was just going to interview me one time.
Right.
Because that's really his book writing process. He focuses on a topic that his ideal avatar would be interested in related to small business challenges, but he may not be an expert in those things. And so he's going to go source experts and then create a framework or a toolkit that simplifies the entire synthesis of his interviews from all these different experts. So I was just meant to be like one of the many experts in the book. And when you read the book, like if you read the book, there are other experts that are quoted and talked about in terms of stories or things like that. But during the book writing process, he found that he was calling me more, asking me questions about specific frameworks that I had shared with him. He just kind of kept calling and asking more questions and asking more questions. And then at one point during the manuscript was still not finalized at all. He was like, I have this, he emailed me and he was like, I have a crazy idea. It's out in left field and I would love to talk to you. At that point, I already knew what he was going to ask me because I knew that this was kind of a model that he had in terms of having a book and then having a partner with that book in terms of the business, because his most famous book, if people know, is Profit First, right? And he has a company with Profit First. But when he wrote that book, he actually didn't have everything set up on the back end. And that was something that they had to go back and do a revision of the book and get the company set up. And so he knew going into the next books that he was going to be writing that he wanted to kind of have all of those things in place before the book actually launched. So when he reached out to me, I remember like being in a hotel room with my very best friend at the time and still very good friend to this day, Amanda Bond. We were in the same mastermind at the time. And we were like, should you just pitch him to run the company? Because he already took the IP. Like the IP is going in the book, right? So should you get ahead of this? I remember like strategizing with her, thinking of like, should I send him an email? Like, should I ask him? Like, should I just tell him? Like, I'll run the company for you, like, let me be a bigger part of this. And then he sent the email before I even had the opportunity to send it to him, and I knew what he was going to ask me. So I actually hired a lawyer prior to that meeting because I had thoughts of what might happen, like in terms of partnership. And I was like, what do I need to know? Like, like just give me some small tips so that I can go in a little bit more prepared. So I hired a lawyer pretty quickly and then got on that call. And from there, we developed a partnership. And then I became much more heavily involved in reviewing the manuscript, helping to edit the manuscript, changing stories, certain things, and then also developing the company. So I am actually, I still am, but was like the sole owner of Run Like Clockwork. And then we had a licensing deal contract for the Clockwork book, tools, materials, any intellectual property from the book. And so this is like a very interesting arrangement, especially since the intellectual property was mine, but then it's going in the book and then it's joint, right? I actually had to buy that license so that I could be the sole provider of Clockwork tools and materials, right? Like anything Clockwork intellectual property framework related, I had to buy that license to be the sole licensor. So no one else could sell anything that was like Clockwork. Even Mike, he couldn't even sell like Clockwork coaching or something.
Right.
And then he gets a percentage of our sales, anything related to Clockwork, right? If I was going to go do something else and it didn't have any Clockwork relation, then I wouldn't owe him that percent. And that was a 15% of revenue at that time.
Ever wondered what would actually break in your business if you took 30 days off? That's the exact question Adrienne built this free one-on-one call around. In 45 minutes, she maps where your business is dependent on you pillar by pillar, names what that dependency is costing you in both profit and in what your company is worth, and gives you a specific first move to change it. This is for the founder who's built something real and is finally done being the bottleneck inside their business. I honestly can't believe Adrienne is offering you 45 minutes with her for free. So do yourself a favor, schedule a spot on her calendar ASAP before she changes her mind. Book your call with Adrienne at level11leaders.com/book a call. That's level 11 spelled 1-1, level11leaders.com/book a call. The link will also be below in the show notes. Wow. This is fascinating to me. Okay, I have like literally so many questions, but I'm going to back up for a second because there's these two elements, right? Like there's what you guys did with the company that stemmed from the book, but then there's also the book. Let's start with the questions around the book deal because I want to get that process more clear for our listeners. So at the time when you started to realize, okay, I'm becoming more than just like a single one-off interview. I'm really like becoming the source of the entire framework. Like I remember reading Clockwork for the first time and even like the queen bee, like the whole breakdown of that. Like I know that was all you. And so for you, what was in that moment in time, what was the incentive of deciding, okay, I'm going to really give away like my best IP, the whole framework to somebody else's book versus just saying, actually, you know what? Like I gave you an interview, but anything, further from here, I would rather just write my own book about this someday. Like what was the thought process there about joining forces with Mike on the book in that more in-depth way versus maybe saving that for down the line, you writing a book yourself?
Honestly, 10 years later, I can confidently say I had no idea. I had no idea until it was too late. Like I was introduced to this person by a mutual contact who, put people on pedestals. And I think I put people on pedestals of like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is this amazing author. He wants to interview me. And I have this expertise and he's interested in what I'm saying. And I'm not saying this to like fault Mike at all.
Yeah.
Like Mike
Yeah.
is an amazing person. He was an amazing partner. And he had a lot of street cred in the
Yeah.
industry. He was someone I was happy to meet and help. And I think that's also my nature is like, oh, he's asking me questions. Like, I would love to answer them. And I'm also a believer in like the law of reciprocity. So I'm like, if I help him as he writes his book, then like something is going to return back to me at some point,
Totally.
But I also didn't really understand the process until it was way down the line. I didn't understand that this would just be like that. Oh, one interview is normal. Multiple interviews and asking me for my frameworks is maybe not as normal or harder to claw back at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I share that because I think we're just a little bit uneducated sometimes in terms of intellectual property. And so I'm glad you're doing the series. I'm sure that's where
Yeah.
this stems from, right? Is like,
Yeah.
but I had no idea. And I think I had no idea until when I was talking to Amanda Bond and we were kind of thinking about things like this book is getting published and who knows, I won't have any say of how much credit I'm getting for my intellectual property or if it's even going to be attributed to me. I didn't know how it was going to be written. I didn't really get any like as just an interview, wasn't really prepped on the process of like, oh, am I going to get sign off approval on what you use or say? None of that. There was none of that. It was just very casual and friendly, which was fine
Yeah.
until I realized like, okay, here's your options at this point. Once the intellectual property was out there and in his hands and really had been now adapted to something, probably improved for his readership, right? But once that had already happened, that's when I was kind of talking to Amanda Bond, my friend, and we were like, well, you should just offer to run this because that's kind of his model. And you want him to be thinking of you because you've already shared the intellectual property. So that's going in there either way. So what's your best move to get ahead of this, right?
Yeah.
Also a lot of ego that I had to work through and remove, because part of my negotiation process at that time was asking for co-authorship of the book.
I was just going to ask you about that. I was like, was that ever on the table? So yes, please tell us.
I asked for it. I asked for it actually multiple times, because we also did a revision in 2021 or 2022, which that book ended up being about 60 or 70% different than the original book. It's almost a completely new book, the revision.
Wow.
It's so much better, to be honest. Like, both books are great, but like the revision is amazing. And I was way more involved in that in terms of intellectual property and client stories and improvements, because we had been doing client work for years now with this exact framework. And so both times I did try to negotiate for co-authorship and did not get that. But that was something that I asked for. It was something that probably would have changed the entire trajectory of where we are now, if I'm being completely honest.
Totally.
Because at the onset of this agreement and partnership, that was a big piece, was like, okay, you are probably not going to get credit from a lot of people for the ideas that you came up with and have created, right?
He's saying this to you.
I'm saying this to me.
You're saying this to you. Okay. Just like talking yourself through it.
This is me talking myself through the process, right? Like, you're not going to get that credit. And is that okay with you, right? Like, is that about your ego? Do you need to get credit, or is your goal to make a bigger impact? And I knew by partnering with Mike, I would be able to make a bigger impact. And so I was like, does it matter if, Sandy, whoever working with me as a client, knows that was, or reading the book in Delaware, like, does it matter that she knows that Adrienne came up with some of those ideas? Or does it matter that she has the book in her hands and is getting the business help that she needs?
Yeah.
And at that time, for me, I removed the ego and I said, it doesn't matter. Like, I want to be able to reach more people with this work. Mike is absolutely a conduit and a way for me to do that, right? Because he had credibility, he had a platform, he had contacts, he had a publisher, he had a book deal, he had a publishing house, like all of these things that would make sure that the book got into more people's hands. And that was more important to me at the time. And then I think over time, the ego creeped, it resurfaced, and the pains became different over time, like.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit of the backside of the dark side.
The dark side, exactly. I was just going to say, I really appreciate your candor on this subject, because I think it's really hard sometimes for anyone really to reflect on something that did serve purpose and did good things in your life, but to also be like, there are some things that with the knowledge and the wisdom I have now, that I have regrets for, or I would do differently. I think it's hard to admit that, even to ourselves, but especially publicly. And so I am so appreciative of your willingness to kind of share some of those potential pitfalls, so that anybody going through maybe a similar situation in the future can just be a little bit more cognizant of some things to consider or even ask for. I am curious, because they denied you co-authorship, were there any concessions made on, like, for example, like, could you write the foreword? Were there things that you could get some ground on, like, okay, well, you at least have to mention me by name in like these areas in the book, so I have some like personal name brand presence in this?
No, but I wish you would have been consulting me at the time. Like, I think when I went into the negotiation and asked for the co-authorship, and it was, communicated that was a Penguin thing and that was not something that was going to happen or could really even be negotiated, I didn't even know or think to ask for a concession, like a foreword. Now, I am mentioned in the book and given credit in the book for those ideas. And then the lead flow was always, positioned in the book to then go to what we call like our Clockwork kit. And the Clockwork kit was owned by me. So I was, building an email list and all of that. And so the mentions in the book, those were not actually concessions I asked for. They were in there. And I think I got better concessions in the revision than I did in the first one. Like, I still think, based on the amount of intellectual property and feedback and consulting that I did for the book.
To hear the rest of this episode and unlock weekly subscriber-only content and community access, join us as a premium subscriber at cubicletoceo.co/podcast. The link is below in our show notes.